All right. Hello, everyone. It's Brittany with Community Rec Magazine. Thank you for joining today's roundtable on Closing the Gap, How to Thrive in 2023, presented by Cody Norton, Nick Lindauer, and Constance Miller of Daxko. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please send those over in the Q&A feature. We'll make sure to get those answered for you before we wrap up today. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the Daxko team to share more about what they do and how to thrive in 2023.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, everyone. My name is Constance Miller, and I'm a senior director with Daxko, who is a leading provider of software solutions as well as digital marketing within the health and wellness space. And we've been working with nonprofits our entire company lifespan. To introduce myself a little bit, I have been working in the nonprofit space as well as the government space for more than 20 years and have been deeply involved in both messaging as well as fundraising, board membership, and also leadership levels related to research, product, and marketing. Cody and Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Constance. Hey, everyone. My name is Cody Norton. I'm currently the Vice President of Sales here at Daxko. Have been working with nonprofits myself a little over 11 years. Worked for a little over 5 years with nonprofits, mainly in the event space and putting together special events, and then transitioned to the Daxko side. So really excited to be with everyone today.
And to follow up with Cody, my name is Nick. I have over 20 years experience in digital marketing, and I recently joined the Daxko team within the last year to head up the digital efforts and bring my experience to the nonprofit world to help increase overall memberships and member retention and engagement with your websites and your digital marketing efforts.
Navigating change is on the slide. Some of you, I took a little gander at the registration list, may have heard me speak about trends before. If you have not, you're going to get a deep introduction to me very quickly, because I mentioned I've worked with nonprofits for 20 years, and I start doing this with my hands when we talk about navigating landscapes. I could not be more interested, both on a personal and professional level, as we keep a pulse on not only what is going on with the world, but what that means in terms of how we reach communities, how we communicate impact, and what that means that we need to do from a messaging side, what that means that we, either working in or with the nonprofit space, are able to communicate that we can make decisions on, both within external trends and with our own operational trends. I think I can confidently say that everybody on this call has had to speak to something as every day as how to make a budget decision, and really big decisions around how do we reach as many community members as possible to make them aware of our program or our impact, and even better yet, how do we communicate to funders the impact that our organization is having, or again, a government entity, if it is for funding streams or just general awareness. So one of the pieces that we're going to kick off with today is really an understanding around one specific market trend. We're going to talk through a bit of a use case that we can extrapolate to other community organizations that we have in the nonprofit space. The example that we're going to talk through when it relates to trends is membership, but if we put our operational hats on, we're really able to apply it to anything related to programming or general messaging, again, about our community impact. What you're looking at in this very clearly labeled chart where it says inflation and community churn is that, again, in the broader space, so outside of ourselves on this call, inflation is impacting the world, but specifically these are US numbers. Typically, we expect, as we're doing operational planning, that we have somewhere, if you can see those pre-COVID numbers, that generally we get around 2 to 2.5%, if you follow trends over the past 15 years, of a general cost of living. So we're all very familiar with this concept. It costs more to do business every year. It costs more to live in the world every year. And it costs more for our members, again, to live in that space as well. And therefore our program dues, if we have them go up, our membership dues, if we have them go up to account for such things. It has been, again, a very specific impact profits to see that bump in inflation that has happened post-COVID, where you see that we went from, in 2020, a freezing on inflation where it went down, and then the residual effect of those low inflation rates throughout the world. So again, why are we looking at this slide? How does it relate to the people on this call? Why are we bringing this up when it comes to nonprofits? And there's a very specific reason. I mentioned that I got personally passionate about nonprofit data. This graph right here, I don't care what industry that you're in. You're looking at it, you're somewhat aware of it. We feel it at home. We feel it in our own pocketbooks. Our members feel it in theirs. When it comes to either serving the community, and again, whatever health and wellness space you're in, this is hitting you in a very specific way because of your unique funding streams, whether they're grants, membership, program based. So that's what we're going to take a look at as we go through the next couple slides. Cody, I'm about to ask you a question, which is, what do you see in this slide as we look at inflation rates in the world? That's what you see on the left. And then for those of you who can, if on the call, if you can read that really tiny print, you're going to see our case study, which is real data that we have pulled across the thousands of customers that we work with around their membership fees. So again, as a real high level, you've got US inflation rates and the cost of living going up on the left. And we've got our thousands of customers and their increase in membership dues over the same year. So Cody, what have you seen or what have you heard working with so many nonprofits during this time?
Yeah. So it's been really interesting because if you double click on any of these graphs here, either the 2022 or the 2023, it has really felt like, through talking to a number of the nonprofit organizations we work with, there's been a distinction between larger multi-location nonprofit organizations and smaller single location organizations. Our larger multi-location partners have a regular rhythm of assessing this every year. So they're taking a look at what is actually happening in their market. What are their competitors doing in this area? What are truly the cost of, my goodness, their wages, right? Are they going up? What is their staffing retention typically look like? And they might not be increasing to the level, as you can see here, of what inflation actually is overall, but we are seeing, for the most part, that there is an increase being applied. On the other side of that, our smaller single location organizations, they're really nervous. They are nervous about assessing an increase. They're nervous about triggering cancellations, right, as a result of doing that. Yep. But they're also really concerned about increases to their minimum wage. And so it's felt like, for a lot of those smaller organizations, because there hasn't been a regular process of doing this, that they're in this place of hesitancy. But as you can see here, this is the actual data. We are still, even for those that are increasing far below what the market is actually doing. So it's been really interesting to have those conversations and hear from each of those partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the differences in size. That, as you mentioned, clicking through, when you can see the rows that roll up into each of these columns, that is absolutely correct. And you said something important, which is that's consistent across the country. So sometimes we like to talk about the trends, particularly post-COVID, as regional, which is very important. I mean, there were different responses to pricing, there were different responses to lockdown, as we know, throughout location. The recovery data, which I think we've been clearly talking about as a community for years now, is really normalizing towards size, as you mentioned, of organization, not in addition to location. Certainly there's some local considerations, but absolutely having the data confirm, Cody, what you just said around size of organization. Okay. So this is combined. From the previous view that we just saw, this is the net impact over the past 2 years of the gap that we see in terms of increased dues. Again, just to use that word broadly speaking, I know many associations or organizations, you have different revenue streams. We are using this again as one example. It's the largest example in the data set, and comparing it to other sources of revenue, it's really representative of what we see in program fees as well. So if you were to combine this gap, the quick eyeball math that we're doing is the rates, again, of moving throughout other fee structures that are in our community are again on the left, and then the made up increase of where as nonprofit health and wellness organizations, we're looking at the right. So you can see quite a gap there. What would you say in terms, Cody, if there's anything that you would speak to around the overall impact of the past 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think where our partners are starting to have some earlier, right, rather than later, but they're starting to have a realization that when you think about accounting for recovery, those members who have left and haven't come back, they're probably not coming back at this point. Right. And so I think there's been a really big push as you think about not only keeping up with inflation. A membership is only one aspect of the organizations that we serve, the greater business and the greater purpose that they're serving in their communities. So I think a lot of our partners are really looking at, if you isolate membership, what are individuals that we could go after that have perhaps never interacted with our organization before, right? Where are those? We call them, Constance, I know we've talked about them as orphaned members, right? Perhaps where they were a member before is no longer open or downsized the location, and now they're looking for a new place to belong. What are we doing to really make sure that we're surfacing ourselves to them? They know that our partners are an option. But then beyond that, what are other areas that our partners can really double down on to drive increases in their revenue? And I think a lot of our partners have really started to lean into programmatic offerings. And so we've seen several get really creative with increasing their offerings, partnering, for example, with local school districts or even local churches. We were talking with a partner the other day in Wisconsin who they knew that they had a community out there that was desperate for more program offerings from them, but they simply couldn't provide the staff to support that need. And so they started building partnerships with local churches to actually accommodate for not only additional space, but more staffing to provide that service to those families and those kids. And so I think, our partners, it really is a challenge to get creative in how we can make up for this gap outside of just an increase to someone's membership.
Yeah, well said. I'm glad that you brought up those examples, particularly as we talk about recovery. So as we move through to the next piece that we're going to talk about, what Cody just said, that is so important to this view. So we mentioned COVID several times. I don't know about everybody else on this call, but we've been talking about it for a long time. We're on year 3. I'm tired of talking about it. I think we're all tired of talking about it. I was on a webinar just a couple months ago where I think something to the declarative effect of like, hey, it's over. We're gonna talk about moving forward in our new structure. And that is true in a lot of respects. Like, I welcome that. I embrace that language. And I really want to talk about this slide and what Cody just mentioned, because it just fuels the communication decisions that we make, as well as you mentioned, the types of offering from a revenue standpoint, but also serving the community that we make. So a lot of the COVID's over. One is we're tired of talking about it. And 2 is, if you really do look, particularly in our industry, and again, this is specifically nonprofit health and wellness data. If you look at the before and after, you can publicly available, everyone can pull up 990s or other industry reports. It looks recovered. We look anywhere between, again, that small to large organization. You're either, hey, we are back to our 2019, or in some cases we've exceeded it, what that dollar amount was on our tax form. That is largely true. I know that varies across organizations, but I can pull a 990 over here and another one in 2019 to what our recent tax forms are going to be like. They're getting closer, if not identical. And we've got some real success stories. There's an asterisk, and I love that there's a literal asterisk on this slide. One thing we do still need to talk about as we move forward that affects, again, our messaging, our communication, our who we are in the community, and to net in those members who have either left or left somewhere else and are looking for a new home, is what we're calling this growth gap. And why we're calling it the growth gap and talking about that today is because this is what it would look like if COVID had not happened. So this is a classic opportunity gap model. Not to use technical terms, it's actually really like some very fundamental ways to look at planning as an organization. So essentially what this means is if COVID hadn't happened, we all had plans for our respective organizations and associations that it would continue growing at an approximate rate every year. There's an expectation that things will go up and down. We know that, but that every year, it's essentially going to increase. Our revenue will stay the same at worst or slightly increase at best every year. So when we look at the growth rates leading up to, and what this shows you is if we'd grown at the rates we were going 3 to 5 years before COVID and we kept on that trajectory, we're actually, as an industry, only 85% recovered. So if there'd been no COVID, we would have this much more on the graph on those tax forms this year. That means that opportunity space, if we look at what that would mean, and we'll get into some specific examples if we model, let's say a $10 million organization, they would have had more than $1 million now. Let's say we had a $10 million association organization, it would be now worth more than 11 than if COVID hadn't happened. And maybe now they're back up to 10, for an example. We've got some great specific data on that. But that is really what we're talking about when we say the growth gap. As we are communicating to our members, as we are expanding our programming, as we are choosing where to invest and how we talk about ourselves and how we reach people, we're not almost recovered, you guys. We've got 15% more of where everybody on this call would have been. So when we think about it like that, the opportunity space and where we place our investments in both our time and our spend is even more critical, because we do have those members who've churned. We have those members who are looking for just a different experience, who haven't yet found a home or who might not yet know you. All right. So this, you guys, I don't like to read off slides, but I do want to read this one. 53%. I almost expect this to be, from a self-reported standpoint, a little bit higher. And here's where I challenge this one. What is now online research is quick review. So even a search at this point, when we have, hey, I want to go buy blank, fill in the blank, or find X. Even a search these days is where most people start. So when we get to the standpoint of online research of which one is the best, they're already thinking of a buying decision, or they're already looking for a solution. So I want to challenge all of us to think like, yes, more than half. We know this, but we also know that most of us, when we're looking for something, even just start with a basic search. So why is this important to know? One of the things that I really want to talk, Nick, to you about as we move along is, if we're thinking about this, if we're thinking about the fact that, like, I may start with a search, but more than half of us are saying we're doing research, which is beyond that. Why is that 53% or arguably more so important to this discussion?
I think very easily it ties back to the growth gap. Like we talked about growth gap in terms of memberships and revenues. But what happened, the cause of that growth gap, COVID, right? What did COVID cause people to do? It caused people to go indoors and go online. What has happened since COVID was lifted, COVID restrictions were lifted, they haven't changed those online behaviors. We have not seen any indication that any of these online services have decreased. They've only actually continued to increase, even though people are going outside more and they're interacting in the world. The online behaviors have continued to stay trending. So people that never ordered online before were forced to order online. People that never had a smartphone now have smartphones. We saw this huge shift where everyone went indoors and they went online because that was the only thing to do. And that's why it's hugely important to consider that as part of your overall strategy, because this slide is correct. You have multiple front doors. It's not just your website. Your website is the hub. It should be the primary brand expression. But what drives to that hub is all the other places that people can find you now. They can find you on Facebook. They can find you on Instagram. They can find you on Google, Google Map listings, local listings, search engines. They're finding you in all these channels and they're funneling into your website. And that's really why you have multiple front doors, because every piece of information and listing you have out there is another way to acquire a new customer who either relocated to your area or is, just now on their little device on their smartphone at home looking for something.
As a common experience, I'm sure all of us can speak to this. I don't know about how many folks have kids on the line, but my kids, even on a daily basis, will, Nick, bring me hey, I thought of this thing and I found this, and bring it up. And even I will get presented. So we have the front doors for ourselves, and we also have the front doors of everybody else around us, giving us recommendations. Like, we think of things and then we go find them and share that information. So what is it then, if that's the case, and that's the way that we're living in the world now, what is it specific to nonprofits and leveraging digital marketing to amplify impact and to live in this world well that we should be considering?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons to consider, especially for nonprofits. One of the two things, one, it's usually cheaper, and we'll talk about some free options that we have later on in the presentation, but it's usually cheaper. A display retargeting ad is going to be much cheaper than a billboard on the freeway. And you're going to get better, more focused eyeballs. With digital, we know that we can hyper target the folks that you're looking to target within your area. We can retarget folks to increase the membership upsells. And there's a lot more options to make it cheaper and to make it work, make your dollars work better for you, basically. Second thing there, it's a little bit faster. We can get things, we can get a digital campaign going up, within a day, depending on how fast the client can go. We always have to caveat that because it's always creative and engagement there for brand guidelines. But we can get these things up really fast, and then we can optimize. So that's the other fast part of it. Like, you can buy a billboard and it takes a couple of weeks to get your artwork out there. It takes, if you can find somebody to even hang your billboard these days, it takes a couple of weeks to get that done. And then what if it's the wrong messaging or wrong creative? Then you got to get it taken down, or a storm impacts it and the creative is ruined. You got to get that fixed. You got to follow up, make sure the lights are on. There's all kinds of things to do with billboards that you don't have in the digital space, and we can change that stuff a lot faster. So if we see that an ad is not working, or your landing page isn't working, it's not converting, that membership flow is not working, we can make those changes on the fly, and you're up and running right back in the game. So
yeah, I really like what you said about.
Yeah,
I like what you said about not only the cheaper, which is absolutely true, because we know we can, make the money back that we invest there. But I like about the quick changes. Everybody has a website, right? Like, everybody has a website, but how is your website doing is the real question, which is what you're saying, right? Like, how is it performing? Like, yes, we have a website. Yes, it's got buttons. Yes, it has, the information that we want on it, but is it working for us? Are we getting clicks? Are we getting, getting registrations? Are we getting membership conversions? So can you talk a little bit more, and I think this is on the next slide, about specifically, you mentioned something important for nonprofits, which is Google ad grants. This has been a challenge for the entire nonprofits, or I might be going ahead before, but I want to get to that. So we'll flag to Google ad grants specifically. But when we talk about, let's come back to targeting search, and like you mentioned, optimizing search, like search optimization, and everybody on this webinar may know what SEO is, and but just to state search engine optimization, like, what is it when you're saying making sure your website's working? And you mentioned the term optimizing your website. Like, that's an easy thing to say. What are we looking at here? Like, it says the words organic traffic and you see results. Like, why is that performance such a unique skill set versus just having a website?
Yeah. So when I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the presentation, I've been in the space for over 20 years in digital marketing. I actually started on organic when they have a term between white hat and black hat SEO, where we used to be able to keyword stuff websites. If anyone remembers a website with like a paragraph of keywords stuffed at the bottom, That's not SEO anymore. That's not what we do. That's not allowed. Google doesn't let you do that. Organic optimization, or SEO, and search engine optimization, is making sure that your website appears in the search results for the keywords your customers are looking for. And that is going to be a combination of optimizing the content on your website, to the tags on the back end, to the overall website architecture, and then including listings, local listings, or links that are pointing into your website. And the other piece is making sure you don't have any old stuff out there. You have old URLs. Sometimes people change websites and pages go dead. We need to make sure that those are pointed correctly so that the search engine robots or the spiders can actually follow those correctly. So it's way more than just keywords and content. It's all of those pieces working together. But ultimately, the goal is to present the users with the best experience. That's what Google wants, and that's what we want for your customers when we optimize a website, is to make sure it's the best experience. It's very, and in this case, we're talking about members. Are you there when where they're looking for you? Your competitors are showing up. A wise competitor can be at the swimming club down the street, or it can be the local gym. You have a lot of competitors in the why space because of the varied interests. And so the optimization is a little bit trickier because you're not just looking for members, you're looking for new potential members and everyone that might be looking for your services. So your competitive set is actually much, much larger. And we have to be very hyper-focused on your optimizations for your website and the content that we put on that website to attract those members. So we're competing with the Gold's gyms that are out there, and we're competing with, the swim club down the street. And it's a challenge out there in the world.
Yeah, one of my favorite, I mentioned I've been involved in nonprofits for a long time, and I'm currently on the board of one. And one of my favorite things to do is just test, like Google. I will secret shop our own and say, like, I know we're launching this new program. What happens if I go search for it and see where we fall? Because so much still, and we even have some wonderfully rich programming. So much of our registrations sometimes are still by word of mouth, or by like who came before knows again. It's not by the organic find. So the netting the person who doesn't already know you in what you just said is to me, both as a, somebody who is a participant, a program participant within nonprofits, and a board member, and a former team member. Like, it's that organic find. It's that I don't know you, and if I search for this thing, do I find you? Versus if I know you. That's really such a big opportunity space, as you mentioned.
It's a relationship between that referral that you mentioned. Like, your friend might refer you, but then I'm going to go validate it on Google, and I'm going to search for you. And if you don't show up, I'm going to go to the next one.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. You're lost.
Yeah, exactly. Or yes, the path I take and when I find you and when I don't. Exactly. Yep. To your point. Yes. So I mentioned Google Ad Grants because I was excited to talk about it. I think we have some more information about that as well. We kind of have done this registrations online now. We skipped ahead to look at this piece. Do you guys want to, let me do a quick time check here. Okay. So telling your story. I do want to keep coming back. I'm going to mention it a couple of times so that we don't forget. So everybody know that we're going to talk about Google Ad Grants because it's so important. And if you don't know what that is, hang on for that, because I'm thrilled to talk about it. And if you already do, we've got some great information. But website growth and telling your story. Tell me some more. So, like, what is it that we should be taking from? We've talked a lot about finding our messages. We've talked a lot about the importance of optimizing your website. Like, why do I care about the numbers on this slide? Like, we've already kind of talked about the ROI here. Like, what is it that we want to talk about? What's happening with these impressive numbers on this slide? Why would I care if I already have a website and it's already, working for me? We've got some registrations. I think we do. Like, what should I be paying attention to?
There's a lot. We could spend the entire webinar to go over what we should be paying attention to, and I'm happy to help. The big takeaway is, what are you missing? You may be getting registrations, but say you have 1,000 visitors to your page and you're only generating 20 registrations a day. Well, that's the great gap. And how do we get those remaining 980 visitors to your website to convert? That's your on-page optimization, your overall conversion optimization. But let's start with the fundamentals. Do you offer online registration? Can members book a class on your website? Can they do the things that they now expect because of COVID? Can they do those things on your website? And if you can't, those are the first things we need to fix on your website to make sure that you can capture those members. Otherwise, it's too much effort and they're going to leave.
Yeah, exactly. So can you go to the next slide and like show those
Yep.
quick bullets on, so if we boil all this down, because I can get really passionate about this, you guys, it's pretty common. Is this telling the story? We're talking about results, and that's important. The ROI of results. And Cody, I know you're going to come to a great example of that. You see these paths. I like this slide because even if we're going to just eyeball it here, do you see these paths, like this concept of something starts and then you keep going through and then something else happens, like telling the story, them finding you, telling the story, and that resulting in not just a button clicked, but a commitment in some way. I'm going to register. I'm going to schedule a tour. I'm going to blank. And now I did it. That is a path in digital, and that setting up that path to make it so that people don't exit the path is part of the entire goal of digital marketing. It's like, we want to keep you engaged so that you get to the point of a commitment in some way. Again, whether it's commitment for a tour, whether it's a purchase, whether it's a registration, whatever that is. And then I think the other piece that I really wanted to call out here is that if you are an organization that does fundraising, same thing. We've seen some paths lost, donor paths lost as well. How easy can we make it for someone to give $5? And sometimes I do not want to ever, especially as a marketer, underscore the importance of telling our story, because even if I don't complete the journey today and I know about you, I'm now listening, right? Like if I understand that there's a nonprofit in my community that does something that I care about, and I didn't know that before, that is now a prospect in some way, even if I don't get through the journey. So I really wanted to call this slide out because my thing I brought up three times, and now the fourth time is on the next slide, and I'm checking time. I want to make sure we get to it, which is Google Ad Grants. And if everyone's already familiar with this, fantastic. It has been a complete massive effort to Nick, for you and your team to navigate how to get this money. And what this is all nonprofits, hopefully everybody knows, that qualify for up to $10,000 in your pocket a month to spend for this cause that we're talking about right now, for this effort that you're talking about right now. So Nick, can you quickly speak to, and then Cody, I want to get to the wonderful case example that you have. Can you quickly speak to why this is so complex? Like I feel like if I hear Google Ad Grants and there's 10 grand out there, that's fantastic. Show me the form, I'll fill it out. Like, why is this a concerted effort to know exactly how to do and get your hands on it? Seems like it's been a bit complicated. Is that correct?
Yes and no. I mean, you're correct. Anybody can go on this call, search Google Ad Grants and fill out a form and apply for the grant. What we've found in our efforts is that we found the best ways to how to answer those questions and to guide our clients through the grant process to increase that approval, because Google will approve you for up to $10,000 a month.
That's right there.
We've been successful 99% of the time to get the full 10,000 for every single Y that we've applied for. So we've kind of figured that out. But it is something that anybody can do for sure. What Google Ad Grants is not, you said, when we're talking about it, it is only advertising spend that can be used on Google search. It cannot be used in Google Display Network. It can't be used for remarketing campaigns. It's just for search. It's only for nonprofits. And the goal is you can use it for any keywords, but their real goal is to help you drive membership, increase awareness, increase donations, and to raise your overall program awareness. So my team steps in and helps with optimize existing Google Ad Grant campaign and increase that $10,000 reach, because you can spend $1 a click or you can spend 25 cents a click. And if you spend 25 cents a click, you get a lot more traffic. But we also make sure that it's an effective traffic for you and what your programs and goals are. It is one Google Ad Grant per tax ID. So if you have multiple units, they need to have different tax IDs to qualify. Otherwise, you only can get one per tax ID. And that's just a small fundamental setting with Google Ad Grants.
Okay. So it's really having the replies to get that full 10,000 as opposed to up the 10,000, and then use it so that you get the most out of it. It's the, yes, I can spend this, but I want to get as much out of that spend as possible is the opportunity there.
Most effective usage on it.
Wonderful. All right. So then moving along, Cody, to turn back to you. Can you tell me about this particular YMCA and how that applies to our topic today? And I say that because I kind of know the story and I'm excited to hear it again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a great story. So we were working, goodness, it's been probably 18 months now, Constance, with the Mankato Family YMCA, single location Y in Minnesota. And they were in the process of a lot of organizational change. They were actually on a legacy software provider. And so we're really looking at updating multiple facets of how they run their YMCA. A part of that was an evaluation with our team. In this process, as I'm sure many of you can imagine, right, that they have a streamlined staff. So their marketing director, Liz, discovered Google Ad Grants, and she went through the process of applying for Google Ad Grants, doing all of the legwork required to try to secure those funds to better position their organization in the community. Unfortunately, the quote you see on the left-hand side there was what she received back. Your website is not up to our standards, and therefore you're ineligible for these grant funds. That small screenshot, which I know it's hard to see in this setting, was a quick picture of their website. And what they found is that their website was really hard to navigate. It was hard for their community to find what they offer. Liz actually shared that their team regularly received inbound phone calls from parents and individuals in their community trying to navigate to and find ways to make a buying decision with them, right? And so just imagine all of those that were getting frustrated and not making the phone call. They knew that they were really missing out. So they decided to partner with Daxko in this area, and we completely rebuilt their website for them. That was, as you can imagine, a pretty big project to tackle on top of their software conversion. But what they found is once they went live on that site, within 2 weeks, they were fully approved for their Google Ad Grants. And so really, really exciting story. They've continued to do new leaps with their site, activating online registration and online membership join. But they've really found ways to put those grants to good use. And the really cool thing about this is you can start small, right? So a lot of the details that Nick covers, it can feel really overwhelming, right? It's so much knowledge. It feels like, my goodness, how are we going to tackle this? Partnering with someone that's going to keep you informed, but then also give you the bandwidth to start small, see how you're doing in terms of results, and then make sure you're growing in a meaningful way. It's been really exciting to see with the team at Mankato.
So in both either their example or again, kind of going back, Cody, how have you found what we have here on the side, which is like representing if you've got limited resources and you've even got those $10,000 ad grants, but you're a nonprofit, you're trying to make the most of what you have, squeeze all that ROI out of where you have both time and spend. Like, why did we go from what you just said to what we're looking at now? Like, what's so important about thinking about not just our website, not just digital marketing and leveraging those grants, but like now all of a sudden we're looking at response time. Tell me about that. Tell me about why this is helpful.
Yeah. So, I think in the nonprofit market, the word sales it can generate a lot of different reactions, right? And some of them make us feel a little uncomfortable, I think, in the nonprofit space, because there is a key differentiator between the nonprofit partners that we serve and a for-profit gym or club, right? And we want to make sure that we're differentiating our message. What we just talked through up to this point was, I will use some sales terminology here. How do you drive interest to the top of your funnel, right? And so if you're doing all of the things well that we just went through, you should now be driving a lot of interest, a lot of prospects, whether they be a registration prospect, a member prospect, a prospective donor even. You should be more effectively driving them to your organization. The key now is, okay, how do we convert? How do we actually execute on that interest? And so what you're seeing here is a visual of the importance of promptness, the importance of speed. I'll direct your attention to the far right. That 17% is representative of a conversion rate within 24 hours. And I think this is typically where a lot of our nonprofit partners live, which is when I go in the doors of many organizations around the country and I ask, what are your expectations? What's kind of the goal for how quickly you respond to me if I call in or I fill out an interest form online? How quickly am I going to hear from someone? Usually 24 to 48 hours, right? Mm-hmm. What's really interesting is, as you can see, that's only yielding 17%. As we move closer, the conversion rate goes through the roof, right? So I think the question that I typically get, Constance, is, well, Cody, that's great. Like, we don't have a sales team. Like, how in the world are we supposed to capitalize on all of the inbound interest within a minute? Like, that's insane. I can't do that. And this is where I think technology really comes into play. So when you think about your ability to execute on the traffic that you're now driving to your digital front doors, are you enabling your team to better capitalize on someone's attention without immediate human interaction, right? So how is your organization leveraging things like automated text messages? How is your organization leveraging things like automated emails for a calendar invite to book an orientation? Things that you want your staff to do, but create a more, I guess, accessible way to then facilitate that human interaction. And Constance, we even have some partners that are taking it a step further, and they're deploying technology that prompts someone on their staff to actually be connected on the phone with that person live, right? And I think some of that is, in the nonprofit world, we see a lot of our partners throwing people right at problems. If we can better leverage technology to enrich that top of funnel and better leverage our technology to really weed through and find those needles in the haystack, it probably makes sense to staff someone who all they're dedicated to is converting, right? And communicating the difference that someone has seen through these digital front doors.
Yeah, that's such an important part. If you think about, you mentioned the both the combination of response time and like where we put people's time or where we put spend, like how quickly, in theory, if we look at that 1 minute response, which would be that automated response, right? Like I raise a hand online and I get immediate text, or to your point, if it's a person, I maybe get an immediate call. Certainly this can be automated, but if we have people on it, how quickly someone's investment in either salary in a team member or in a solution would have a return. So if we get up in that less than 5 minute space, so if you're looking at this graph, just to call out, those are conversions from I'm interested in something to I committed to it. So that 1 day space, just to restate what Cody said, if we get back between the difference between a minute and an hour, that percent change there is what you're looking at on the screen. So you're essentially like 100 times more likely, literally to the math, to get a yes on what you want someone who's interested to say yes to, if you move it up within that 0 to 1 hour, 1 minute to 1 hour range, than if you are to go beyond the hour to a day. So doing the quick math, if I've got a person spending time on that, or if I have a solution spending time on that for me, making that spend back would be very, very quick to justify, very quick to invest in and see that results in. So I hope that's clear to everybody. I love a good percentage. I want to call out what we're looking at here. Like this is, hey, I'm interested. Either I call or I'm clicking on something, or I'm interacting with you in some way and you talk back to them, or a solution talks back to them. That's this window of time here. I went through personal experience to join, and I got all the way through a local nonprofit and I still had to go in person. We still have some instances where in order for me to complete the yes, maybe not get information, but complete the yes, I even called and it was, hey, come in. When can you come in? So I want to think about that experience too. Sometimes we assume we can even complete things and just wait for a return call back. I just went through this, talking about a lot of personal examples, and we're going to wrap up in a second, take questions. with no organization on this call. It's a local museum in my area. I was interested in a summer camp experience for my child and could not register online. You had to call, and I didn't get a call back for a week. And in that time, I chose a different camp. And that just happened to me last week. Great, wonderful, wonderful location. And part of the communication was you can always come in person. And so it's this wonderful organization. We actually have membership there, we support them in other ways, but we weren't a camp conversion for them. My family wasn't a camp conversion for them. I chose another wonderful option for my children, but there is still hey, it'll be faster if you just come in, or the luck if I get someone on the phone. So I know that oftentimes we talk about the digital space and assume that everything can be completed online. I want us to really think about you and your organization. Can you actually complete everything online, even the forms? Can you? Where are you stopping people? Or where, if they have a question, did they stop? Because even if we say, yes, you can, I want us to think about optimizing that path in this discussion as well, because I would really challenge that even if you can, in some cases, there's likely not in all. Like if someone has a question, or if they, whatever it is, all the way through to that commitment level, we always have gaps. There's always opportunity to tighten that. So, okay, moving to wrapping up. Thank you so much for your time today. As I'm sure that I hope we've demonstrated, all three of us on this call work every day in this topic, and our team, both our data analysts and then our people kind of working frontline with our customers, are really deeply invested in understanding the world that we are operating in. That's why we started with that inflation case example, because we work with so many partners and our goal is that you succeed. And the way that we do that is by understanding kind of where our opportunities are, and looking at trends that we see both across the country. And again, as Cody mentioned, with that wonderful example of different sizes of nonprofits and trends that we see there, to make decisions and to kind of communicate what we're noticing, because it so richly informs the million decisions we all have to make every day. This topic is only one of them, as we know, in order for you to be successful. So to that end, I actually want to make everybody available if you move further. And this is just a free offering available to anybody on the call. This is public facing. If you go to daxko.com/Project Thrive, we have an initiative to provide free educational resources. This includes anything from the marketing tips that we talked about today to expert Q&As on operational efficiency, and many other answers to questions that you may need to consider in your role, even ones that we didn't cover today. So we've got dozens. I think I need to check how many we have up there as of now, but we engaged actually over more than 2,000 partners last year in consuming these resources. So I think 91 was our last count. I think we're almost over 100, I want to say at this point. Gotta put in a plug on that across all of the ones available. So this is just a click away if you have any questions. And then there's always information about upcoming ones, again, just available because we really want to help you be successful. So lastly, in summary, some key takeaways on the screen to keep in mind as you're thinking about communicating, as you're thinking about reaching people, as you're thinking about your personal goals. That gap, I want everybody to feel both kind of excited but uncomfortable about that. Like, yes, even when we're meeting our goals, thinking about where we would be, and therefore where we have the opportunity to make up and accelerate to in the next couple of years. That ever important piece that we all have multiple front doors we have forever. That's why everybody here has a website. But Nick, I think you said this, like, are you answering if they knock? Like, can they find your house? That's different, right? Yes, we all have a website. But am I finding your house and not someone else's when I go looking, right? And when I knock on it, am I getting who I expect to come to the front door? To use some very obvious analogies, the sophistication of that answer being smooth and correct, like there is an entire operational system behind that, and like expertise in digital marketing to make that seem seamless. The other thing, again, expanding, again, that potential, we keep mentioning the word optimization. You've probably picked up you guys, that I like a good analogy. It's kind of like dancing. If it looks easy, that means there's a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes. But when you do this well, when you optimize your website, it should be like dancing. It should be like somebody who's like, oh, that looks easy. Oh, they just have a website and it's just working. Perfect. That takes optimized expertise around what everything Nick said, how to do the marketing and messaging on there, how to like have your search engine optimized so that you pop to the top of the screen. It should look and feel like no big deal. It does take some investment and some expertise to make that happen. And then really the whole point of this is we keep coming back to different ways to say a seamless member experience, because if that's the case, then all these things fall into place. Then they know you, they invest in you, they spend time with you, they have that positive referral, all of the outcomes that I know everyone on this call is looking for, and that we absolutely are invested in helping with. So with that, I think we've got about 10 minutes left for questions.
Awesome. Great presentation, guys. This is Brittany popping back on. I did notice a couple questions pop into the Q&A feature. So it looks like they're from David. Hi, David. Good to see your name. So David had a question early on when you all were talking about revenue. So I wanted to give some preference because I know this was early on when you first started. So his first question was, it said, how about other revenue sources? So he followed that up with, or pivoting to other revenue sources, including foundation and government grants.
Yeah, I think Cody, you and I could probably even take a swing at this one. So when we're talking early in the presentation, we've got some examples. So we can answer this from one of two ways, like what our partners are doing around that. And Cody, maybe I can give that one to you from a trend perspective, what we're seeing from other revenue streams. So depending on the type of nonprofit, we all know we have a diversified revenue stream, direct revenue, indirect revenue, grant revenue, donations, depending on how large and how your nonprofit is structured, its operational resourcing. So from the government grant standpoint or the grantor standpoint, one of the things I want to underscore, and this all ties together, is that we are seeing the application of the trends that Cody talked to in terms of the types of programming offered, and therefore the types of grants people are applying to shift in the nonprofit space. I'm sure I'm not saying anything new to anyone on the phone. Why I would merge that with this discussion is because, again, I think as everybody's experts in winning that grant, communicating effectively in that grant, both in terms of your community reach and your messaging, as well as just the program offering, that is ever more important in a trend in the nonprofit space of getting those higher grant dollars, or even if you already have them, effectively reporting to that governing body, whoever the grant is, whether it's a government grant, whether it's a private grant. There's an entire shift in the philanthropic community. For those who are involved in fundraising, you already know a lot of this around what is expected in terms of reporting. And one of the things that we're really seeing is, like, when you have optimized reach, you can talk about not just your programmatic reach, but your awareness in the community as a nonprofit. And so that's how I can answer it from a trend perspective. I'm happy to follow up with some examples of resources that to reference what I just said. Those are certainly available. I can follow up with that. But Cody, would you add anything from an operational perspective?
I mean, Constance, you covered at a high level, I think, the gist of it. The only thing I would add, just to double down on what you said, is there seems to be certainly an added level of visibility, and not only to the program reach, but what we're seeing is a stronger desire to be able to track the specific activities that are happening within those programs.
Yes.
And so that's something that we're acutely aware of and really invested in along our partners. We see this, I think, more commonly lately in the Boys and Girls Club space, but what are those activities that are happening within those programs? How are you tracking them in the way of the numbers that are involved, their improvement in those areas, so that can roll up and ultimately account for those repeat grant dollars?
Yeah, and one of the great things to do, I know one specific example that you're referencing is combine the community reach efforts for that, the registration efforts, and then as you track the almost before and after of, like, okay, let's pretend it's youth programming, and you have a goal of a program. You measure where they are in the start. We are all familiar with this. You measure where they are at the end, and that's the impact that your program had. one of the best things to include in that is your operational data. Like, how often did they attend? Like, does the impact go up or down with attendance? Does the impact go up and down if they are registered for more than one program? Meaning, like, this seems to be more effective. This grant funded program was very effective if the child attended every day, was very effective if they were also involved in another one of our programs, was very effective if it was something we did in partnership with the school. And that type of operational tracking, without getting into a whole other webinar, Cody, I know is something that you and your team have been talking a lot about, with operational solutions and software that helps with that. Any other
Perfect.
questions?
Yeah, let's see. I was checking. I didn't see any other questions open up. So, for anybody here with us, if you all think of any questions afterwards, the email is there in the presentation. So please reach out to our friends at Daxko. And also a friendly reminder that we do have this recording for the presentation. So we will make that available on demand if you would like to revisit any of the topics that were covered here today or share with any friends or colleagues. So we'll make sure that that is available to you. I don't see any more questions coming in. So do you guys have anything else to add before we wrap up?
No.
No, it's a
Thanks so
pleasure.
much for the
you all
opportunity.
Thank you.
That was great.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again. We'll make sure this is available on demand and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.